Letter to H.P. Lovecraft from Robert E. Howard, March 2nd, 1932. As to my feelings toward the mythical Picts, no doubt you are right in comparing it to the Eastern Boys Indian complex and your own feelings toward Arabic things. My interest in the Picts was always mixed with a bit of fantasy. That is, I never felt the realistic placement with them that I did with the Irish and Highland Scotch. Not that it was the less vivid, but when I came to write of them, it was still through alien eyes. Thus, in my first Bran Mak Morn story, which was rightfully rejected, I told the story through the person of a Gothic mercenary in the Roman army. In a long narrative rhyme which I never completed, and in which I first put Bran on paper, I told it through a Roman centurion on the wall. In The Lost Race, the central figure was a Briton, and in Kings of the Night, it was a Gaelic prince. Only in my last Bran story, The Worms of the Earth, which Mr. Wright accepted, did I look through Pictish eyes and speak with a Pictish tongue. In that story, by the way, I took up anew Bran's eternal struggle with Rome. I could hardly think of him in any other connection. Sometimes I think Bran is merely the symbol of my own antagonism toward the Empire, an antagonism not nearly so easy to understand as my favoritism for the Picts. Perhaps this is another explanation for the latter. I saw the name Picts first on maps, and always the name lay outside the far-flung bounds of the Roman Empire. This fact aroused my intense interest. It was so significant of itself. The mere fact suggested terrific wars, savage attacks and ferocious resistance, valor and heroism and ferocity. I was an instinctive enemy of Rome. What more natural than that I should instinctively ally myself with her enemies, more especially as these enemies had successfully resisted all attempts at subjugation. When in my dreams, not daydreams, but actual dreams, I fought the armored legions of Rome and reeled back, gashed and defeated, there sprang into my mind, like an invasion from another unborn world of the future, the picture of a map spanned by the wide empire of Rome, and ever beyond the frontier, outside the lines of subjugation, the cryptic legend, Picts and Scots. And always the thought rose in my mind to lend me new strength. Among the Picts I could find refuge, safe from my foes, where I could lick my wounds and renew my strength for the wars. That is a letter that you can find in this book, Bran Mak Morn, The Last King. And welcome, my friends, welcome to the Robert E. Howard Show. The Robert E. Howard Show once again, here at the Rustic Vaughan Lodge today, where we'll be talking about Bran Mak Morn for the last time. We're concluding our discussion of Bran Mak Morn. In this book, The Last King, the Bran Mak Morn stories are all collected, as well as some other stories about the Picts. Last week, we talked about worms of the earth. Unless it was the week before. I don't remember. Anyway, in our last episode, we talked about worms of the earth, the greatest of the Bran Mak Morn stories, and one of the greatest Robert E. Howard stories. There are not many Bran Mak Morn stories, and so we've only talked about a few. And Worms of the Earth, unfortunately, the greatest of the Bran Mak Morn stories, is the final story in which Bran Mak Morn appeared. However, it's not really the last Bran Mak Morn story. Following that story, in this volume, is a story called The Dark Man. This takes place long after Bran has passed away. And the protagonist of the story is Black Turlough. Black Turlough, who is an outcast from his Scottish clan. He's an outcast from his clan, however. His clan has been attacked by Vikings, a particularly bad band of Vikings. And they took a young woman that he knew. And so he is going to rescue this young woman, if he can, So he commandeers a fishing boat and he goes after this wretched band of Vikings. On the way, he encounters the scene of a battle. A lot of bodies spread around, some of Vikings and some of these small, dark men. A tribe of men that he does not recognize. Now, amidst these men is a statue, a black statue of a person who seems to be a king. He takes this statue with him. He feels like he should. He has a compulsion to do it. And he takes this statue all the way to the place where the Vikings are staying, the Vikings' hideout. And he goes to try to rescue this young woman of his clan. I won't tell you too much of the rest of the story. There is some good artwork in this volume. There's Black Turlough there, talking to the fisherman whose boat he's going to take. But I will tell you this. That statue was a statue of Bran Mak Morn. And this story does feature Picts. Picts, a much weakened band of Picts. Picts long after Bran Mak Morn has gone. And at this point, Bran Mak Morn is just a memory that they revere. And the statue itself seems to have magical powers. It is a supernatural statue, and you'll see how that works in the story. The Dark Man is a really, really, really good story. One of Robert E. Howard's best, probably. I mean, it just works so well as a story. And it is a fantastic conclusion to the Bran Mak Morn series. This is a very short series, and it ends halfway through the volume, pretty much. And the other half is miscellanea, where you get a bunch of other stuff. You do get, before that, a couple horror stories that feature Picts. You get a typescript from one of the stories that feature Picts. You get all this really cool stuff. You get a manuscript there. They reproduce a lot of really cool stuff, probably to make up for how few stories there are. You get a draft version of Worms of the Earth. You get an untitled story that has been unpublished up to this point. So this volume just has a ton of really great stuff. And it's so worth getting, because the stories in it are just fantastic. The Bran Mak Morn stories are so moody, and the character is just so powerful. For such a short series, Robert E. Howard sure packed a lot into it. And for the best of the stories, Worms of the Earth, Kings of the Night, I mean, that is some of Robert E. Howard's greatest writing. And The Dark Man is pretty darn good as well. It might not feature Bran Mak Morn, but it kind of does feature Bran Mak Morn. And it is about his legacy, in part at least. And it's sort of sad, because he failed, Bran Mak Morn. He could not defeat Rome. He was fighting a losing battle. But he could do nothing else other than fight. And fight he did, and he gave a good fight. And so he is revered by the Picts who came after him. A weakened, diminished group of Picts. What is that? That was a ridiculous truck. Sorry. A weakened and diminished group of Picts, but at one time they were a mighty nation. And it was Bran Mak Morn who forged that mighty nation. He brought the different tribes of Picts together to fight the Romans. They lost, but it was an achievement just to make that happen. And Robert E. Howard makes you feel that. A lot of the darkness that you find in Robert E. Howard's best fiction, you can find in these stories. And that sense of gloom hovers over the whole thing, gives the stories tremendous atmosphere. Really, it was a great achievement for such a short little fantasy series that you could find all in this book, Bran Mak Morn, The Last King. And at this point, he had written Solomon Kane, he had written his King Kull stories, he's written Bran Mak Morn. And now it's time for him to move on to the greatest series of stories that he ever did. The series of stories for which he is remembered and has made him immortal. The Conan stories. And next week, we will be moving on to Conan the Barbarian. Okay, guys, that's all I have to say this week. I will catch you next time.